Hey, how you doing? Welcome to another video. I want to cover a topic today from one of our comments. And this person is definitely still plugged firmly into the old alcohol way of thinking. And before I read you the comment, I want to say that I tried to reach out to this guy. But even though we exchanged a few comments, a few words online, there was no shift in his perspective, even a little bit. In fact, the more I tried to give him some advice, the more steadfast he was in sticking to his position, right? The more annoyed he got, which was turning a bit unpleasant. So there was no point in continuing it, right? So as is life, sometimes you just can't help somebody who just doesn't want to listen, right? And, that's just the way it is. So this guy said to me that I was missing the point. He said people learn to moderate not because they really want to drink less, but because they want to be part of the world. And this just struck me, they want to be part of the world. If you're fine with being a quitter, this is what he said, and telling the rest of the world that you're a loser and that they should shun you, that's great. But if you want to be part of the world, then you have to learn how to drink. And this is all part of the con, right? This is all part of the propaganda that keeps you plugged into this idea that pouring a poison into your body is fun, right? That there's some point to it, that there is an end game to this. This person really thinks that you have to drink to be part of the world. And if you don't drink, you're a loser or a weirdo or a zealot or whatever it is that they want to call you. It's a negative thing. And the thing that struck me about this comment was, I get it, I've been there. If drinking is your world, if the only way you look at how to be with other people or to meet other people or to chill out or to relax, or whatever it is that you see in that, if that is your world, then what do you expect? Your eyes are only going to see what your brain interprets, right? And it's this way I used to think about myself. Alcohol, I felt, was a part of my life. It was a part of who I was as a person, who I felt I was, who I was at the core. And once you get stuck in that way of thinking, everything revolves around that. Everything can only revolve around that. When I was talking to some cops in New York a few years ago, a word that kept coming up over and over again was decompressing. And these guys felt that the only way to do that was through alcohol, and particularly drinking alcohol in a bar after they'd come off their shifts, cop bars, where they were sure they wouldn't be hassled, they wouldn't get any hassle, where there was an element of safety, where everyone understood them at a raw level because they were all experiencing the same things. Everyone understood the kind of things that you were going through during the day on a day-to-day basis, right? All the bullshit, all the dangers, all the abuse that you had to put up with, the huge responsibility of your job. And there's something to that, right? This decompression. There's a pull in that which is very strong, and it's difficult to resist once you get pulled into it, right? I used to feel a very similar thing back in the day when I worked in the forestry. Some days there were very calm days. They were planting trees, they were tending to saplings that needed taking care of. It was just a peaceful way of living. We're out in the fields, there was nobody else around, and it was just quiet. It was nice. But mostly I worked with a chainsaw, and what we were doing was opening up these inspection paths. So we cut the branches off the trees so that somebody could walk all the way through the forest. And this was a very loud, very angry, very threatening machine that you were working with. And it was always at shoulder height because we had to cut off the branches at this height, right? So this was all day long that we had to do this, right? So one false move and, the saw would bounce back and maybe hit you in the neck or something like that, right? And that was how I felt when I finished work, right? I needed to decompress. Now, it seemed to me at the time that the only method of decompressing or actually chilling out was in a local bar after a few pints. Of course, there are many ways of achieving a much greater level of relaxation, and decomposition, if you like, than plugging yourself into a Guinness tap after work. But then it comes back to the old adage: if the only tool in your box is a hammer, then the world becomes a nail. Take for example what this guy is saying. I'm presuming it's a young person, for argument's sake. We'll talk about this as a young man. And his whole reason for using alcohol, or his need to moderate his alcohol use, to be part of the world. Listen to what he's saying there. To be part of the world. How sad is that, really? That you have to poison yourself, you have to poison your life in order that you can fit in. And this is not an unusual thought, right? It's not just about the alcohol either. I've heard the same thing with social media, with people being addicted to likes and to getting clicks and to getting positive comments. When they post a photo, they're posting photos on Instagram or whatever it is that they're doing, and they're posting comments and photographs on everything in their lives, right? They're living their life as if viewed through this Instagram lens, right? Or through the lens of an Instagram post. And then now you've got cancel culture as well, where you're afraid to say what you truly think because, some arsehole out there will try and get you sacked because you've offended them, or they'll say to you, you're a racist or a homophobe or a religious nut or a sexist or a misogynist. Everything is about identity, and it's become that way. Your ethnicity, the color of your skin, your sex, your gender, your sexuality, and it all better be the right stuff. You better be in the right position, you better be the right person, or watch out, buddy, you're for the chopping block if you don't say the right things. Now, it's all right for somebody like me who doesn't give a damn about that stuff, but I can imagine how difficult this is for any young people growing up these days, treading as lightly as possible through this victimization minefield, trying not to get blown up, having your life ruined because you've hurt somebody else's feelings. It's a race to the bottom, folks, and karma is not something that you want to be messing around with. What goes around comes around. So, these people who are employing these tactics, that same thing is going to come around and bite them in the arse. But listen, this young guy who wrote this comment, right? His worldview is that he doesn't use alcohol. If he doesn't use alcohol, he risks being ostracized or shunned, cancelled, in other words. If you read some of his follow-up comments, he talks about being beaten up for not drinking, or that's in his mind, right? So in his mind, if he tries to go to a bar and not drink, there's a perceived threat, real or not. Not only from the other people in the bar, but from the barman as well, and I'm sure he doesn't mean this literally, and maybe he does, right? How do I know? I don't know the kind of places that he lives. He goes so far as to equate not drinking with being a loser, like I said in the beginning. So the thing about this is, I drank for over 30 years. It's a decade since I unplugged from alcohol, and a decade since I broke free of that kind of thinking. And I regard those 30 years of my life where I was drinking alcohol, either at home or I was handing over my hard-earned cash over the counter in a bar to some stranger, right? They were years when I lost the most. I lost my youth, I lost my vigor, I lost my dignity, my self-respect in the moment, certainly. And I diminished those things in myself over the years as a man, right? Look, it is what it is. You can't change the past. All you can do is to learn from the lessons that your own past is trying to teach you. If you're open to these things, if you open up your mind to those lessons, then you're going to learn. If I could go back and give myself one piece of advice, it would be stay clear of bars, stay clear of nightclubs, anywhere where the sole purpose is to sell you as much drink as they can, as much of this drug as they can. The same advice I would be giving to myself to steer clear of a drug, then it's the same thing by a different name. So look, when I look back on my own life as a drinker, I feel like I was a completely different person. And I was walking around with a different worldview in my head. I was living my life, making my decisions based off of this worldview. And this worldview that I had was revolving around the delusion in drinking alcohol. And it's a delusion that is taught to us by our culture through advertisements, the local culture that you live in, that you happen to be brought in, up in, right? But it's much closer to us because it's our family and our friends that create this delusion as well, or just uphold this delusion. But I think the delusion becomes much deeper because it's you that goes along for the ride. I went along for the ride with this. I was feeding the delusion in myself. I believed all the lies. I lived my life like the delusion was true, right? I made this my life. I made that 30 years of drinking. You know, the easiest person to delude is always yourself. You know what to say to yourself to get yourself to go along with that delusion. You know what emotional buttons to press. You know the hiding places within your own mind. You know, the places where you don't have to think about what might be true or what might not be true or what's lies or what's not lies. And the more you do this, the more you plug into that habit and the behavior and the rituals and the drinking thinking, the more the delusion is going to infiltrate and subsume your life, take over your life. You know, the more involved your mind becomes in the delusion, the more you're going to believe that you're a loser or a quitter, right, for wanting to do anything else in life. You know, the world is always going to reflect what you perceive. That's all it can ever do, is you see things and then you're interpreting those things, right? That includes your attitudes, what you're responsible for, your commitments and your value judgments. You know, these things that you're telling yourself about being called a quitter or a loser, that's a value judgment. It's a personal view that becomes a kind of a prison of your own construction. And, you know, one that you're never going to get away from without some serious thinking, without some serious introspection. And nobody else can do the work for you. You have to stop the work, stop the flow yourself, do the work yourself, and move on to other things yourself. But it has to start with that introspection. You know, I always feel sorry for people like this guy who's made this comment, because I get where they're coming from. Like I said, you know, I've been there. I feel that discomfort. You know, if you like, it's a lack of surety in life, a lack of certain knowledge. You know, when your knowledge of the world revolves around the truth that is so fragile and small, and the worst thing is you don't know any different. You don't know that you're there. You don't know you're in the middle of this thing, right? You might have an inkling that you're in some kind of a functional bind, but you don't have the experience or the knowledge to figure it out. And you're never going to figure it out if you stay plugged into the exact thing that you're trying to comprehend, right? You're always going to be stuck in that very small, very limited viewpoint on the world. It's like the old joke about one fish asking another fish, how's the water? And the first fish asking, what's water? Do you get what I mean? So, look, the truth of the matter is, the more you understand of the world and its workings, about people and their workings, about life and its workings, the more you expand your knowledge in any direction. The more you see that you don't understand, right? The more you see that there is so much more out there that you don't know, right? But we've got to return to the basic premise that you can only be responsible for your own change. You cannot be responsible, or you can't change somebody else who doesn't want to change, or they can't see what you're telling them, right? The best way of being responsible for your life and for yourself and the changes that you want to see is to be open to building a working knowledge of yourself, right? That working knowledge doesn't mean that you know everything about yourself, It doesn't mean that you know everything about your life. No, it means that you know enough about yourself and your life to be able to think clearly, to be able to bounce ideas around, to rely on your own experience of yourself and your life. There's nobody else that knows you and your life better than you do yourself. And to be able to rationally weigh up, to think about your choices and to rationally weigh up what your choices are, to come to some realistic conclusions and to make decisions based on those conclusions that are more likely to lead you to a good outcome. You know? And what is a good outcome? You know, I can't decide that for you. I'll leave that up to you to decide. It's certainly not being frightened of being judged or conforming to some batshit crazy idea that you have to pour a toxin into your mouth for fun, or conforming like a sheep, or whatever. Anyway, look, I'll finish it up for there. If anyone wants to get some help to start out getting sober, to begin the process of at least making some sensible choices about whether or not you should continue to be plugged into the alcohol, into that alcohol way of living, we've got a free beginner's guide to get in and staying sober. The link is in the description. I'll leave it there for today. Take good care of yourself, and I'll speak to you soon. Onwards and upwards, eh? Bye now.